Hey everybody, in today's video we're going to be talking about my 2 keys to hit crisper chip shots and avoid those chunks and skulls that ruin your scores. Alright everybody, so Scott Hogan coming at you here. We are going to be talking about chipping short game, one of my favorite things to talk about because it really does have a great impact on your ability to score. So, I told you we're going to have 2 keys today about your short game, and the first one's going to be a setup thing. Second one is going to be in swing, and I think these are 2 game-changing ideas that will let you understand how chipping and short game works like the pros do when you see them hit those shots off these super tight lies and they get the spin on it, all that good stuff. You're going to be able to understand what they're doing and why you haven't been able to do it in the past and how you're going to change that. So again, 2 things. First one's going to be setup. So when we go to make a setup, all right, most people, when they are set up to hit a chip, especially if they're trying to loft it, they are trying to help the ball in the air, and that comes from the setup. And as much as I will talk to people, I'll tell people, they'll say, oh, I don't do that. You know, I know to hit like down on the ball. I know to let the club strike down through. In the end, their setup is just in a position where it's not going to let them do that. So we want to make sure we get into that position. So what's that going to look like? Well, I've got just a regular wedge first off. Okay, so this is just your standard wedge. I use my 60 almost always, but you know, this is going to go for a 54, 50 pitching wedge, just whenever I'm hitting pitch shots or short chip shots. So a couple of things that we have to get is, again, set up for success so we can avoid all those disastrous shots. So in the setup, and this is our first key, proper setup, we're going to do 2 things. One, we're going to get our feet pretty close together. What happens is you're going to realize that kind of where our nose is, that's a key point about chipping, and that positioning is where it's going to let the club hit the ground most likely. So if I have a wide stance, the wider my stance gets, the more my head can kind of move and be in a bad spot. And so most poor chips are going to be because we bottom out too soon, and that means the nose is dropped back. So when I was saying we have a setup that promotes lifting the ball, what I see is most people have their head too far back, and automatically it's just going to promote you going up into the golf ball. It's kind of like a driver setup where you're trying to swing up into it, and we're not trying to do that here. We want to definitely have some sort of descending strike down to the ground and down to the ball. So first thing we want to do is get our feet narrower. When we get our footwork down, it becomes just a lot simpler. Again, our head it's a lot harder for us to move because I start falling off balance. So if I get my feet close together, all of a sudden my nose is going to be right at the ball, just in front, and if it is behind, it's barely. Okay, so we would rather see it, I'd like to see it just in front, so you're going to feel a little bit more pressure on your lead foot. But again, there's a couple different ways you can do it. This is always a consistent thing though, as I do see that stance getting narrower and narrower, especially if you're struggling. So narrower stance. From there, again, you're going to might feel a little lead pressure on your lead foot, okay, because you're going to try to put your nose up in front. That's a great setup right there. If you're set up like that, you're going to be in a good position to have some success. Now, the second key to being able to hit good crisp chip shots is you have to understand the wedge. All right, you got to understand your clubs, and if you do this, this is critical because you know what happens is we always have this little thing that happens. We flinch, or you know, it's hard to describe. As somebody that went through the yips personally many years ago, I know what it feels like. It's when you're trying everything you can do, but as you go down to the ball, that club just does what it does, and you're afraid of chunking it and fattening it and blading it. It's all of that. So it's comes from the idea of, all right, do we really know what the wedge does? And if we do, we have to start trusting it. So we want to practice using what we would call the bounce. So if you're not sure what the bounce is on a wedge, we're going to look at it here. The bounce is actually just this back part of the wedge. So you can see here's the leading edge, the front part, the back part. The bounce is where we actually want to hit the ground. So if I'm going to make a swing here, just to experiment. And I want you to go out and experiment with this too. And you can do this on mats, you can do this on, you know, the fairway grass out there or the rough. If I was to take this club and actually get the leading edge, so what I'm going to do is get this leading edge down, right? If I hit, it's going to dig, all right? If I were to get the bounce engaged, if I get this club back like this, see how that club bounces? It doesn't dig, all right? That's why when you see professionals hit these shots, they hit the ground, but there's very little divot or no divot. It's because they're using the bounce, okay? That's a really critical part of being able to chip, okay? If I go with the leading edge, let's say I go with the old school leading edge. I'm going to lean my hands forward, get the leading edge down to the ground. If I chip that, the only chip I have is to hit that low kind of bump and run, which is a shot you might need. Definitely might need that. But with the way conditions are going nowadays, faster greens, tighter fairways, need to get the ball up in the air quicker, you're going to really limit yourself if you do just that shot. So again, we would like to see the bounce get engaged. Okay, so again, it's going to feel like I'm hitting with the backside of the wedge. Now, what can we do to practice this? One of my favorite drills to do is actually just take the club in my trail hand, one-handed chips. Okay, so I'm just going to get set up. Might have to get a little open for this one, and I'm just going to make swings where I really feel like I'm throwing the club down at the ground and getting that feel of just kind of slapping the ground, club bounces. Then I'm going to step up and hit a chip or a pitch, whatever you want. And it's going to go up. You can hear I hit the ground and the ball is pretty close to the same time. That ball goes up in the air. I'm going to do that a couple of times. Actually, I like to do that and see if I can chip the ball to a target circle. It's a great way to see how good you're getting at it. And then you would take it into two hands and you would actually just hit the chip using that bounce. So again, if I'm looking at this, I'm not going to go forward. I'm going to keep my hands a little more neutral. Feel like I'm keeping that club and hitting the back side of the wedge. That's a real big key to being able to maneuver the wedge into the turf. Now, one last little bonus for why we want to do this is if we use the bounce of the club, what actually happens is we actually extend the area we can hit the ground. So if I'm using the leading edge, all right, and if I got the hands forward, leading edge down, I pretty much have to hit the ball, and I have to hit the ball first, and I have to hit it low. And so that's all I got. If I don't hit it good, I'm in trouble. I'm really going to hit a bad shot. When I start using the bounce and getting this technique, I actually can hit the ball a little thin. I'm not saying you can do it by a ton, but you can actually hit it a little thin. And what's going to happen is that ball is going to start spinning more because you're going to hit more of the face. Okay? You're going to hit it maybe a little lower, but it's going to spin, and it's still going to turn out okay. Or I can hit the ground first. I can hit the ground first. Again, not by much, but I do have a little bit of room to hit the ground and still hit a really good shot. And actually, a lot of professionals, when they're doing this, a lot of them will try to hit the ground just slightly first, especially if they're in like a, you know, they play in Florida or in these, you know, southeastern areas with Bermuda grass, and they're just kind of trying to like play it like almost like a bunker shot to get out. Gives them a lot of room for air and from a tough situation, and they hit really good shots from that. So using the bounce gives you a lot more options. So again, you had two keys. One is you got to have a proper setup. So again, getting your foot stance width correct, getting your nose placement correct, those are two really big keys. We actually added a third key in there, which was just the handle of the club. We don't want it too far forward because we were trying to go with the bounce. All right, so we kind of wanted it more neutral. And then from there, it's really understanding how bounce works, getting some practice in using the bounce. That's a huge key to being more successful with chipping, being able to get the ball close. And if you really want to shoot lower scores, it's a necessity to be able to do that. So if you enjoyed this video, please make sure you click the subscribe button down below. And after you subscribe, make sure you've clicked the notification bell. That way you get notified of all of our tips. And also, we want to hear down below your thoughts on how much bounce are you using on your wedge. because that's another critical thing we want to talk about coming up in future videos. So love to hear how much bounce you have on your wedge. If you're not sure, you know, with mine, I have these Vokey wedges, so it says the loft 60 and the number below, I have 8 on my 60-degree wedge. That's how much bounce is on there. I'd love to hear what types of bounce you're using. That way we can talk more about that effect and help your short game, not only from chip shots, but bunkers and other areas as well. So again, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.